Soulmates, it was just another Friday night out with the guys, celebrating Nick's birthday at our favorite restaurant. The place was buzzing with the usual crowd, everyone enjoying their meals, laughter bouncing off the walls. Crazy fucking bitch. The voice was sharp, cutting through the low hum of conversation. I looked over, along with half the restaurant, to see a couple sitting at a nearby table. The guy was dressed nice. Dress pants, button-up shirt, the kind of guy who looked like he had his life together. The girl, in a striking red dress, was absolutely stunning. But she was on the verge of tears, likely after being called a crazy fucking bitch, and the whole place had noticed. Now, I'm not one to jump into other people's messes. I've got my own life, my own family, and I generally avoid drama like the plague. But something about the way this guy decided to humiliate her, in front of everyone, didn't sit right with me. It wasn't about being a knight in shining armor. It was about basic decency. I got up, walked over, and told him straight, "You can't talk to people like that. Not here, not anywhere." He wasn't hostile, didn't even seem rattled by my involvement. He just stood up, glanced at her, then to me, then back at her, and repeated it. "Crazy fucking bitch." Then he walked out, leaving her sitting there, stunned. I apologized to her, asked if she was okay, if she needed to call someone. She said she was fine, thanked me, and after a minute I headed back to my table. The rest of the night was uneventful, at least on the surface. We sang happy birthday, ate, laughed, but every now and then I felt eyes on me, and when I looked up, it was her, the girl in red. We exchanged a few smiles throughout the night, but nothing more. I am a married man. As we were leaving the restaurant, I bumped into a guy dressed in all black, hoodie up. He muttered something I didn't catch, and I moved on, thinking nothing of it. The night wasn't over. We decided to hit up a bar to keep the celebration going. I don't drink, so I stuck to club soda, just soaking in the lounge's vibe. Everything was fine until I got that prickly feeling on the back of my neck, like I was being watched. I scanned the room, hoping it was just another gorgeous woman, maybe the one in the red dress. But it wasn't. In the dim corner of the lounge, there was a dark figure, the kind that blends into the shadows. He was sitting alone, hood up, face hidden. I couldn't tell if he was really looking at me or if it was just the paranoia creeping in, but I couldn't shake the feeling. After an hour or so, we decided to call it a night. We left the bar, said our goodbyes, and went our separate ways. My car was parked further out, in a lot behind some closed shops. The streetlights were out, leaving the lot bathed in darkness. As I walked, that uneasy feeling came back, stronger this time. I glanced over my shoulder and saw him, a dark figure in a hoodie, keeping pace with me from a distance. Heart rate increasing, I quickened my pace, practically sprinting to my car. I fumbled with the keys, finally got in, and peeled out of there. The figure disappearing into the night as I drove home, my mind racing. My wife and I had recently moved into a new neighborhood. When I got home, Michelle was hunched over her laptop at her desk, her curly brown hair cascading to her mid-back. She looked up as I entered, her big lens glasses making her small face appear even more delicate. She barely reached my chest, but when she sprinted into my arms, it felt like I was holding my entire world. We talked about our night, tomorrow's plans, played a few games on our phone, our nightly ritual. I never bought into the whole soulmates thing, but after meeting Michelle, I was a believer. Our 6-year-old daughter, Athena, wandered into the room, clutching her Cinnamoroll plushie. Around her neck hung a silver necklace with a blue crystal butterfly, her initials AL, inscribed on the pendant. "Mommy, Daddy, can I sleep with you tonight?" she asked, her voice tinged with unease. "Why, sweetie? Did you have a bad dream?" Michelle asked, her voice warm but edged with concern. "I'm scared of the monster outside my window." Michelle and I exchanged glances, a mix of amusement and concern flickering between us. Kids and their imaginations, right? But there was something in her eyes and something specific about what she said that made me pause. She could have said in her closet or under her bed. Then I'd think nothing of it. But outside of her window, I got up, still in my boxers, and slipped on Michelle's slippers, my feet hanging awkwardly off the edges. I told Athena to stay with her mom and grabbed the baseball bat from our closet. It was probably nothing, but I wasn't about to ignore it. Her room was as we left it, toys scattered, bed unmade. I peeked out the window, nothing but a still night. I did a quick sweep of the house, every shadow scrutinized. When I stepped outside, the fog was thick, the cold biting against my bare skin. The slippers were a joke, half my foot hanging out, but I pressed on, circling the house. First, nothing seemed out of place, just fog and silence. But as I headed back toward the front door, something caught my eye, a dark figure, 2 blocks over, cutting through the fog. Under a streetlight, I could just make out the silhouette. A man, hood up, walking away from me. He didn't look back, didn't break his stride. There was no sign he had been near our place. I watched until he faded into the fog, then hurried back inside. We called it a night, but sleep didn't come easy. The image of that hooded figure lingered. My mom and I have always been close. After my dad passed away when I was 8, it was just the 2 of us. My older sister had already moved out, so it felt like we were on our own. Even now, at 42, I still make it a point to visit my mom every week. She lives just a few blocks away, and I often bring her meals, movies, or books I've finished. It's our routine, and it keeps us connected. The day after that unsettling night, I got a text from my mom. It was short, no details, just, "Please come over ASAP." Still on edge from the night before, I didn't waste any time. I jumped in my car and drove over, the sense of urgency gnawing at me. When I got to her house, everything seemed off. The lights were out, and the place was eerily quiet. I used my key to let myself in, the door creaking open like something out of a horror movie. The whole house was dark, empty. I called out for her, but there was no response. My anxiety kicked up a notch as I searched every room. Nothing. Then I heard voices, faint, coming from the backyard. I crept over to the sliding door, the voices growing clearer. They were familiar. I opened the blinds, and through the glass, I saw my sister sitting on the outdoor sofa, chatting on the phone casually like it was any other day. Confused, I slid the door open and stepped outside. "What are you doing here?" she said, her tone casual. "Mom texted me to come over. Where is she?" I replied. "She's in the bathroom in the shed," my sister said. I walked over to the shed, closing the door behind me. I knocked on the bathroom door. "Is that you?" came my mom's hushed voice from the other side. "Yeah, Mom, it's me. You scared the hell out of me. What's going on?" "Well, I ran out of toilet paper. None left in the shed. Your sister and I aren't that close." I felt too awkward asking her to bring me some. "Can you go to the house and get toilet paper from my bathroom?" For a moment, I just stood there, letting the absurdity of it all sink in. I'm a 42-year-old man, and I don't care how lame I sound using Gen Z slang. It fit the moment perfectly. "Bruh," I muttered as I turned to get her the toilet paper. A few weeks later, I had 2 suitcases packed and ready. I was flying out to meet some suppliers in a neighboring state, a week-long trip. Before leaving, I spent time with my mom, kissed Michelle, hugged Athena, and took off. The first few days went smoothly enough. I video chatted Michelle and Athena every night, their faces bringing me some comfort. I tried calling my mom, but she didn't pick up. By the 3rd day, I was worried and asked Michelle to check on her. When she got there, the house was empty. Michelle said it looked like no one had been home for days. I brushed it off, telling myself maybe my mom had gone on a trip without mentioning it. Weird, but not impossible. Another few days passed with no word from my mom. My calls went straight to voicemail. I decided to send my sister to check on Mom, not wanting to keep burdening Michelle. But then my sister stopped answering too. The next morning, I woke up to my phone vibrating on the nightstand. It was Michelle, her voice choked with tears. She was sobbing so hard I could barely understand her. My heart pounded as I tried to calm her down, telling her I'd catch the first flight back. After a few ragged breaths, she finally got the words out between sobs. "Athena is missing. I don't know where she is. I looked everywhere. Her window is open. I stayed on the phone with her until I got on my flight. After a few hours, I was already back at my local airport. When my cell service came back on, I had 10 missed calls from Michelle. She wouldn't answer when I tried calling back. I quickly found a cab and practically threw cash at the Uber driver, demanding he drive like his life depended on it. 30 minutes later, we screeched to a stop outside my house. I bolted out of the car and into the darkness. The house was eerily quiet, all the lights off. "Michelle!" I shouted, my voice echoing through the empty rooms. No answer. "Athena!" I yelled again, my desperation mounting with every step. Silence. I tore through the neighborhood, checking every familiar place, but found nothing. Then I drove to my mom's house empty. My sister's place empty. Everyone's phone went straight to voicemail. It was as if the world had swallowed everyone I loved whole. I was alone, surrounded by darkness, with no trace of where they had gone. A month had passed since I lost everyone in my life. Endless conversations with the police led nowhere. It was like they had vanished into thin air. No witnesses, no leads, no suspects, nothing. But I knew who did it. It had to be the man in the hoodie. He'd been shadowing me long before this nightmare began. At the restaurant, in the parking lot, at the bar, outside my house, always there, always watching. 5 years of sobriety, gone. I started drinking every day, drowning in it, locked away in my house. Work, forget it. I couldn't face anything anymore. Every time the phone rang, my heart would drop, hoping it was them. But it never was. Each time, it felt like losing them all over again. Occasionally, a spam call would come through, and I'd drunkenly scream at them, telling them to never call again. One afternoon, I found myself staring out my daughter's window, replaying the memory of her mentioning a monster. I just stood there, staring for hours, hoping, no, pleading for a sign, something to bring them back to me. And that's when I saw him, a man in a hoodie. I grabbed my baseball bat, threw on some shoes, and bolted out the door. Broad daylight be damned, I didn't care. I knew he was involved. As I got closer, I slowed my pace, hiding the bat behind my back. He turned and saw me, and we locked eyes. "Sorry about your family," he said. So it was him. He knew. Rage exploded inside me. I charged at him, gripping the bat tight, and swung it into his jaw. The bat cracked, splintering on impact. He screamed as he crumpled to the ground, blood pouring from his torn skin. I didn't stop. I dropped the bat and began pounding my fists into his face. "My wife," I snarled, throwing a punch. "My daughter," another punch. "My mom," punch. "My sister," punch. I kept going until his face was a swollen, bloody mess. Then I wrapped my hands around his throat, leaning in close. "Where are they?" He was barely conscious, but he muttered, "I don't know what you're talking about. Please stop. You think I'm stupid?" I hissed. "I saw you at the restaurant, at the bar, outside my daughter's window. You were always there wearing that damn hoodie. Tell me what you did with them, or I'll bash your skull in right here." He started sobbing, struggling to speak. "I don't know about any of that. Plenty of people wear hoodies. I just go for walks around the neighborhood. Every night. We're neighbors. That's why you saw me." He spit out a mouthful of blood, trying to catch his breath. "Then why did you apologize about my family? Everyone in the neighborhood knows what happened. I was just trying to be kind." I grabbed him by the shirt and lifted him off the ground. "Prove it. Take me to your house. If you're lying, I'll kill you right here. I've got nothing left to lose." "I'm not taking you to my family," he said. "You take me, or they'll never see you again." He started crying again, but he stumbled to his feet and began leading me down the sidewalk. We reached a house just a block away from mine. "This is it," he said, barely standing. I shoved him to the ground and walked up to the front door. It wasn't locked. I turned the knob and pushed it open. "Baby," I called out. "Daddy!" A little girl's voice echoed from inside. My heart leaped. She was here. My daughter was here. I heard the sound of little feet slapping against the hardwood floor. Tears welled up as I opened my arms. "Daddy's here, baby." But when the girl came around the corner, I froze. I didn't recognize her. She stopped in her tracks, staring at me, bloodied and wild-eyed, and screamed for her mom. A woman rushed in, scooping her up, glaring at me with fear and fury. "My husband will be home any minute," she said, her voice trembling. "Get out, or I'm calling the police." The man I had beaten to a pulp stumbled inside, shouting, "Leave us alone!" He positioned himself between me and his family, shielding them from me. I'm sorry," I stammered, before turning and sprinting out of the house. I ran all the way back to my place, crashing onto my bed, my chest heaving. The whole month, I had pinned everything on the man in the hoodie, and now, knowing it wasn't him, it was like I was back at square one. My family felt further away than ever. I cried for hours until I finally passed out, exhausted and broken. A few more months passed. I was surprised that the neighbor I'd beaten to a pulp never called the cops on me. I've been bracing for that knock on the door since it happened. One afternoon, my phone rang. I didn't jump up this time. I knew it wasn't my family, and I was right. It was Nick, the friend whose birthday we'd celebrated at the restaurant before everything went to hell. "Get dressed and come outside," he said before hanging up. As pathetic as it sounds, I prayed that maybe, just maybe, he'd found my family, that they'd be out there waiting for me. But when I stepped outside, it was just Nick with a Middle Eastern Uber driver parked at the curb. Nick got out, grabbed me by the arm, and shoved me into the car. "Gun it," he told the driver. "You need a night out, man," he said as the car sped off. "You've turned into an alcoholic, spending your days in your boxers. I get it, but I can't watch you do this to yourself anymore." "Where are we going?" I groaned, hating the idea of facing the world outside. Nick had been delivering my groceries for months. I hadn't stepped foot out of the house since my family disappeared. "To a bar," he said. "If you're going to drink, you might as well do it somewhere social." We arrived at the bar, ordered drinks, and started knocking them back. At some point, Nick went to the bathroom. That's when a woman came and sat next to me. I was already shit-faced, not thinking straight. She bought me another drink, and we started flirting. I don't remember much of what we talked about, just that Nick later came out of the bathroom, saw us, grinned, and found himself another seat. I'm not proud of what happened next, but I ended up going home with her, my stomach full of booze, my mind drowning in loneliness and despair. I just didn't want to be alone for one damn night. We made out all the way to her bedroom, tearing each other's clothes off. She grabbed a condom from her dresser, and we had sex. I didn't last long. It had been a while. We fell asleep, her head on my chest. I was lying in bed with Michelle, our daughter, between us. Everything was perfect. Then I felt it, a presence watching us. I looked toward the window and saw him, a man in a hoodie, with glowing red eyes and monstrous teeth, staring in at us. My daughter and wife screamed, and before I could react, they were gone. The room was drenched in blood. I saw the man outside, tackled him, but he vanished, leaving nothing but his hoodie on the floor. I collapsed, pulled out a knife, and slit my throat. Gasp. I woke up, sweat soaking my forehead, my heart pounding. Just a nightmare, but the pain in my head was real, the regret even more so. I stumbled out of bed, looking for something to kill the headache. In her bathroom, I opened the mirror cabinet. Instead of Advil, it was packed with bottles of medication. Aripiprazole, lurasidone, iloperidone, acenapine, cariprazine, brexpiprazole, meds I didn't recognize. A lot of them. Curiosity got the better of me, so I started exploring her house. I wandered downstairs, through the kitchen, rummaging through drawers. Just random keys and junk. I continued exploring until I came across a door with a padlock. I went back to the kitchen, grabbed the keys, and tried them one by one. Finally, one clicked and the lock fell away. I opened the door to reveal a dark staircase leading into the basement. The air grew colder as I descended, the wooden steps creaking underfoot. Each step echoed through the silence, creak, creak, creak. At the bottom, it was pitch black. I groped around until my fingers brushed against something. A string. I pulled it, and after a few flickers, a single bulb illuminated the room. The basement was spotless. No dust, no dirt. The floor was so clean my bare feet were still white. There wasn't much down here, just a few small cages and a dresser. The cages weren't big enough to fit a human. I approached one of the cages, still in disbelief at how immaculate the floor was. As I got closer, something caught my eye, a small glint of light. I knelt, reached into the cage, and pulled out a tiny, crystal blue butterfly pendant with the initials AL. It was my daughter's necklace. A wave of nausea washed over me. Creak, creak, creak. Footsteps. Someone was coming. Panic surged through me, but there was nowhere to hide. "What are you doing down here?" Slowly, I turned to face her, my breath coming in shallow, ragged gasps. You weren't supposed to find this," she said, her voice eerily calm. A mix of fear and fury boiled inside me. Why the F do you have my daughter's necklace?" I shouted, my voice trembling with barely contained rage. She just stood there, staring at me, a smile slowly spreading across her face. "You're cute when you're mad," she giggled. "What the fuck is going on?" I demanded, my voice cracking. She stepped away, went to the dresser and pulled out a box. Inside the dresser was an elegant red dress on a hanger. "Look," she said, handing me the box. I opened it, my hands trembling. Inside were hundreds, maybe thousands of photographs. All of me, at work, through the windows of my house, leaving my house, driving. Every moment of my life, captured without my knowledge. Some photos were just of my wife, except her face was scratched out of the photo. "See?" she said, stepping closer. Her face was inches from mine, her breath warm against my skin. Her eyes locked on mine, biting her lip. Without warning, she pressed her lips to mine. I shoved her away, stumbling backward. "What the fuck is wrong with you?" "Crazy fucking by dash." I stopped. The red dress, the restaurant, the girl whose date called her a crazy fucking bitch. I remember you," I stammered. Her smile widened, almost playful. "You almost called me a crazy fucking bitch, didn't you? I thought we weren't supposed to talk to anyone like that." "Ever?" She tilted her head, eyes sparkling with a twisted joy. "But it's okay, I forgive you. I love you." She moved in again, but this time I was too paralyzed with shock to react. She kissed me, but I just stood there, unable to move, to think. She pulled away and said softly, "Every guy I've ever met called me crazy, but you came to my table, defended me, you saw the real me. That's when I knew." "Knew what?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "That you were my soulmate," she said, her eyes wide and filled with tears. "I never believed in soulmates until that night, but you made me a believer. I followed you, watched you every day, and I knew we were meant to be. But you had too many distractions. They were keeping us apart." She took a step closer. "You were too close to your mom," she said, her tone softening like she was discussing a minor inconvenience. "There was no way we could be together with her around, always needing you, so I took care of her first. I waited until she was alone, and then well, she never saw it coming." A cold shiver ran down my spine, but she kept going, her voice steady. "And then your sister. I know how siblings are. When a parent dies, they bond more than ever. I couldn't let that happen. I couldn't let you get closer to her. So I made sure you wouldn't have to." Tears were streaming down my face now, but I couldn't move, couldn't speak. I was trapped, unable to escape. "And your wife and daughter," she continued, a look of disgust on her face. "You could never fully love me with either of them in your life. I took your daughter first, during the night. I went back the next day and hit your wife in the head with a hammer, knocking her out cold. She was the last obstacle to our future together." What did you do with them?" I muttered, my voice barely a whisper, on the verge of tears, anger, and every emotion in existence. She pointed at the clean, cement floor, her smile never faltering. "It's freshly laid cement. They're gone, baby, buried right here." I made sure they'd never come between us again. My legs gave out, and I collapsed to my knees, my entire world crumbling around me. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't do anything. My tears splattered onto the cement floor, the floor where my entire life was buried. Everything I loved, everything that mattered, reduced to nothing but cold, hard cement. She reached out, trying to touch my face, but I recoiled, still unable to process what had happened. "I'm sorry it took this long for me to come to you, my love," she said, her voice cracking as tears streamed down her cheek. "I wanted to be there for you, but I knew if I came right after your family disappeared, you'd still have your attachments. I had to wait until you were truly alone, until you needed me. But now we can be together, just you and me. No one left to come between us." She smiled again, that same twisted, joyful smile. "And soon we'll have a beautiful baby together. I made sure of it. I ripped a hole in the condom we used, and I'm ovulating right now. Similar to how all colors come together to form the color white, all my emotions came together to form nothing but fury. Red, hot, fury. My vision went red as I balled my fist and smashed it into her face, sending her sprawling to the floor. I didn't stop. I threw myself on top of her, my fists crashing down with a vengeance. "Baby, baby, stop!" she screamed, but her cries only spurred me on. I kept punching, kept hitting, until a sharp, wet pain erupted in my stomach. The knife slid out, then back in again, and I collapsed to the floor beside her. She was sobbing, her voice shaking with desperation. "I'm so sorry, my love. It wasn't supposed to be like this. I didn't mean to hurt you. I'm so sorry, baby." She began slamming her forehead into the cement, her blood splattering with each impact. "Abigail, you're so fucking stupid. Why would you hurt the only guy who ever cared about you? This is why everyone fucking hates you." She kept slamming her head harder and harder until her forehead was a congealed mess of blood and bone. Finally, she turned to me, her face a horrifying mix of mascara, tears, and blood. And yet, she smiled, a chilling smile. "Baby, I thought of something so romantic, a way that we can be together forever." She then drove the knife into her stomach repeatedly, blood pouring out as she lay down next to me. With one final, desperate push, she stabbed me again, leaving the knife embedded in my gut. She rested her head on my chest, staring up at me with eyes that no longer belonged to the living. "Now we can be together forever," she whispered, her voice fading as the light left her eyes. Even in death, her eyes remained locked onto mine. With the last ounce of strength I had, I pushed her off and forced myself up. Every movement was agony, but I had to get out. I staggered to the staircase, falling over and over, each step a battle. Somehow, I made it to the front door, collapsing onto the porch. I crawled out onto the sidewalk, leaving a trail of blood behind me. That's when I realized where I was. She lived just a block away from me, but it was late at night, and the streets were deserted. No one would find me. That was my last thought before I slipped into darkness. A week later, I woke up in a hospital room, stitches pulling at my stomach with every breath. As I struggled to sit up, a nurse noticed me and came over, her expression a mix of relief and concern. "You're lucky to be alive," she said. "One of your neighbors was out for a late-night walk and found you on the sidewalk. He called 911. The ambulance got you here just in time. The police, well, they went through the house you came from." My mind raced back to the man in the hoodie, the one I'd beaten senseless in a blind rage. He told me he walked the neighborhood every night. Could it have been him? The thought gnawed at me, and sure enough, my suspicion was confirmed later when he visited me in the hospital with his wife and daughter. He told me he forgave me, despite everything. I could barely look him in the eye. Later, an officer came by to take my statement. I laid it all out, the red dress, the photographs, the confession. They had dug up the basement and found the bodies of my family. 3 other bodies were down there too. The officer showed me photos, asking if I recognized anyone else. My stomach turned as I identified one of them, the guy from the restaurant, the one who had called her a crazy fucking bitch. Today, they finally discharged me from the hospital. As I'm heading home, I keep turning everything over in my mind. If that crazy fucking bitch didn't want me to have anyone else in my life, why didn't she kill Nick? Why was he spared? But in the end, it doesn't matter. The damage is done. All I can leave you with is this: soulmates do not exist.